everyone. This is Emma Cogan. If you're not familiar with me, I'm a filmmaker and a costume designer. I'm also the co-founder of the femme-led horror collective Monstrous Femme Films. Today, I'm going to be talking with someone super exciting working in the horror genre right now. I'm going to be speaking with costume designer Whitney Anne Adams. She is the mind behind Freaky and Happy Death Day to You, two of my favorite latest horror releases. And we're going to be talking about everything from the ins and outs of costume design, behind the scenes of Freaky, Happy Death Day to You, her background in theater production, and something I rave on about constantly, which is why costume design is so important to the film experience, especially in the horror genre. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy this conversation. I'm really happy I got the chance to speak with Whitney, and I hope you enjoy it. So, tell me a little bit about how you got your start in costume design because I read that you started out with Broadway and live production.
Yes, I went to school for theater, graduated with a BA in theater from UC San Diego, and then I moved straight to New York because I wanted to work in Broadway, wanted to do
Yes.
theater. I worked in a Broadway costume shop for 3 years, and I made costumes for like so many Broadway shows, probably about 30 to 40.
Mhm.
Then I was Liza Minnelli's personal tailor for a while with
Oh my
my
God, amazing.
with my boss. Then I got to do Beyonce's world tour in 2009. I got to do a bunch of crazy things, and I did that for 3 years until then I met Baz Luhrmann and Catherine Martin.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. So, is that how you made your transition from theatrical productions to film was by doing The Great Gatsby with them?
Another thing I just fell into.
So, that's amazing. I mean, you not only fell into it, but it was from a contest. Tell me a little bit more about this contest.
So for their movie Australia, they had this they had a video podcast series via Apple that they partnered with Apple for, and did like a behind the scenes video on production design, costume design, directing, screenwriting. And a few of the videos had contests attached to them. And so for the costume design contest, you had to design a costume for Nicole Kidman's character when she arrives in Australia. So I was in the middle of, it was for high school and college students. I was in the middle of my college thesis, but I was like, I have to enter this contest because Moulin Rouge is my favorite movie. I saw it over 300 times in high school. I was in the hospital in and out for a while. I was really sick, and I watched that movie every day to sort of distract myself from how horrible I felt and being in the hospital. And so that movie really saved me emotionally in high school. So it's one of the main reasons I wanted to be a costume designer and continued on this path. And so I entered this crazy contest, and like there was a bunch of prizes. Like you could win a computer, you could win an iPod, and then the grand prize was a trip to Australia. Well, I ended up winning the grand prize, and I won a trip to Australia.
Oh my gosh.
Which is totally insane. And I remember when I turned in my costume, I was like, I'm never gonna win. I didn't put a hat on her. She should have had a hat. And I like agonized. And then I forgot about it, moved to New York, and then found out like 9 months later I'd won the whole contest. And I like write, Catherine has a home furnishing lines website. So I like send in a letter to the email address there, and her assistant wrote back and it's like, oh, Catherine and Baz aren't going to be in Australia when you're here. Do you want to come by their house and we'll have tea in their garden? I was like, yes. And it was so amazing. And Silvana she's incredible, and we had like a lovely tea.
Oh my gosh. What a dream.
Right. And to tell them how much Moulin Rouge really meant to me and got me through the hardest time of my life, being sick. It was never quote unquote life threatening, but for me as a 16-year-old, it really felt that way. And so it was a really great escape to get out of that headspace. I still can't believe that all happened, and that's how I got into film.
I mean, what an incredible experience, right? To like have fallen into film like
And the fact that my first movie was being the second assistant designer on The Great Gatsby, and then we won the Oscar. Like, what?
I mean, what more could you want? Speaking of period costuming, you've had quite a background with a lot of different periods. For you, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about period costuming? What's the difference for you from period costuming versus modern day costuming, given your range of experience?
All sorts of things. I've done modern, romantic comedy, I've done horror, I've done period horror, but low budget. And so it was so interesting going from The Great Gatsby, where we had, thousands of costumes and our costume budget was in the millions, like huge movie. And then my first movie that I ever designed was a black and white tiny horror movie where my costume budget was $3,000, and you have to find a way to costume in both scenarios. And so I sort of done the bookends of like the biggest and the smallest. And so now I'm like loving this in between place where you have some money, but the great thing about having a smaller budget is you have to be more creative. And I really enjoy that kind of playing around with, okay, we have this much money. But the thing about Gatsby, we had so much money, but every dollar was allocated. We still ran out of time and money.
So you enjoy having the challenge of a smaller budget on top of script constraints, and it can be kind of fun.
Want to have enough money to do it properly, but then there's something about not just having oodles of money to like throw at the problem. Like, say you're doing a fashion forward movie, you want to have a nice big budget, but if you're doing a movie with the characters who are poor or lower income, you have to make that feel true. Like Millie, for example, in Freaky, she comes from a lower income family, so I had to shop clothes in places that would match her family's income. And so you can't just buy the coolest thing. Like Char's red jacket, it's her sister's jacket that gets pulled from the closet. That still was an affordable leather jacket. It wasn't like a $600 designer thing. I bought it on Amazon. It was $160. It has to be something that felt real, like something that Char splurged on, but for her, a splurge is that level. It has to be something that felt true. And like she could have got it on Amazon or one of the thrift stores or what, that has to feel true to the story. But I do love period movies. I hope I get to do more, in the future. It's definitely something that I absolutely love. But I also love the challenge of a modern movie and college students and high school students. Like I love doing Happy Death Day to You, love doing Freaky. I think also horror and fantasy is a way to like really play around with textures and colors and not sort of get stuck to a grim reality.
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh, and also that like texture and color can really represent even a whole plot just within the costume alone. And one of the things I loved about Freaky is that you can like tangibly feel the whole world being built within the costumes and with all those little details like Char's jacket. And when you did your deep dives on Instagram, which, by the way, if you have not checked out Whitney's written deep dives into the costumes of Freaky, it's extremely fascinating, and you have to go check it out. But you mentioned that you wanted the wardrobe to be based in reality, but also while feeling fresh, but also having to characterize the cast at the same time. And particularly with like Josh and Nyla and Millie's first appearance, we don't get a lot of time with them initially, like right in the beginning, and you sort of have the job of telling their stories through their costume. And wardrobe is sort of the first impression that we get of them. And so, how did you strike the balance between um, things feeling realistic and being based in the world, but also telling their stories and characterizing these people so we feel like we get to know them?
Like you have to really dig into it. Okay, that's what people see first off, but you really have to dig into like the specifics. And Josh, for example, he's saving his money for clothing for when he gets out of town, so he's not wasting his money on expensive stuff right now, especially because he comes from a single parent household, so he doesn't have a lot of money either. So he's going through digging through thrift stores and vintage shops, but he's sort of not, he's saving so he can get out of town, so his clothes are not expensive either, but they still very much reflect his personality. So you have to figure out like, where do the clothes come from, how long has he had them, and so much of his style is the styling of it, cuffing it to the perfect place, having some like a little bit oversized fit, cuffing the jeans to the right length, having the right like sock that coordinates or doesn't coordinate. So it's all those little details and textures that help build something that feels more true to life, and not just get a plain colored sock or something that just feels like you didn't flesh it out enough. And so I try to go for those little details. And like Nyla, for example, I shot for hours finding little pins for her camera strap and for her jacket, and like little pieces, whether you see them or not, that feel like another little piece to their character. So it's not just, here's a person wearing jeans and a t-shirt. It's so much more than that. And then the actors take the costume and really wear it and really feel like the real person.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like there was a really nice, were you able to find like a harmony with the actors in kind of working together to build their character style? Like, was there any sort of, like going through the fittings with the actors and doing it together was, were you able to find like a harmony between like what they feel like their character should be wearing and, kind of how you envision it? And were you able to find like a good blend between everyone's ideas of what their characters should be?
I mean, I try to, as soon as I'm allowed to contact my actors, I do. I got to wait for their deals to close and all that fun stuff. But as soon as I'm able to talk to them, I call them before I start shopping, if I can. Sometimes I got to start shopping before, things happen last minute. But with Chris, the great thing what Chris does is that he had everyone cast by the first week of prep. So I had 4 full weeks to shop for everybody, which is incredible, which never happens.
Yeah.
Like Chris knows exactly what he wants. And also Chris and I have like the same aesthetic. We have the same sort of eye. And so we've always been in agreement with both on Happy Death Day to You and for Freaky. And so we're on the same page. And so he knows that I can go run with our ideas. And then I do a bunch of outfits and the fitting with the actors. And, I call the actors, see what their vibes are for who the character is. And after I'm sort of done talking to Chris and the actors in the beginning, then I go shopping, then the fitting happens. But usually before the fitting, like Chris and I did a walkthrough of all the racks of clothes and he picked his favorites. So that's sort of what I started with in the fitting. And then there's always a discovery process. Like the hardest costume in this movie for sure was the butcher in Millie's body, that red leather. That was the hardest thing. It took 4 fittings to get there, but we got there.
I mean, the butcher in the butcher in Millie's body is arguably the most iconic costume right now in horror. I mean, and of the film too. Everyone's wearing the red leather jacket, everyone's doing the lipstick. It's now officially a staple. And the I think something that people have to keep in mind, the audience has to keep in mind, is that the butcher picked this outfit for Millie. It is not Millie who chose this outfit. And, for you, you had to get into the brain of the butcher as well as get into the brain of the butcher in Millie's body on top of, the butcher's not even, he doesn't even like anything in Millie's closet. He goes to Char's closet, and there's such a deep story built within this costume. And so tell me a little bit more about that and how you built this costume and the world around it.
And that's why it was so difficult, because there's so many layers to it. Like, it's the butcher in Millie's body who wants to go kill more teenagers, and he's like, okay, the way to do that is to dress more attractive, to draw people, but also he's this like middle-aged dude who's never worn girls' clothes before, so it's what is he comfortable wearing. And so there's a lot of shapes that are doubled from Vince's costume to this costume. You have the straight-legged Levi's that very much feel like a very like strong gender neutral / masculine vibe. And then you have a plain black long sleeve top underneath. It was a bodysuit, but you can't really tell, you know. And then big badass boots and the leather jacket. It feels very much like gender neutral / masculine. It's very strong, very like sort of more like looser shapes, something that the butcher like is comfortable in. You know, he wears these big loose pants and a long sleeve t-shirt, and it all felt like the right thing. But again, getting the colors right, and it all has to come from Char's closet. So, you know, we figured that Char sort of maybe went out to the bars or the club when she's not being a police officer. And so she had some more fun stuff because she's more of an adult.
And that reminds me of something that you had said on the it was the Designing the Void podcast that really resonated with me. You had mentioned that you are not just a costume designer, you are also a historian and a psychologist. And I love that because it's so true. With costume design, you know, you have to really pick apart people's heads and your characters' heads, and you have to you know, it's like, what would they put on in the morning? What makes sense for their story? What is their, you know, socioeconomical environment like? There's so many aspects that come into play that aren't just, you know, picking an outfit. And, you know, with Freaky specifically, and with like this costume particularly, the Butcher and Millie's body, you're going through so many brains. You have to pick apart so many brains. You have to, you know, what's the butcher's brain, Millie's brain, Char's brain, the butcher in Millie's brain. You know, what's like the butcher's, you know, he's experiencing what's his brain like in a new body. There's so many different layers and brains to pick.
You know, it's her sister, it's Millie, and the butcher all in the same costume. So that was really difficult, and getting the colors right. And you know, we also had Char wear that red leather jacket in a few family photos around the house to try to like also sell the point that this is her sister's jacket. You know?
I love that.
You see her cop uniform in the closet. You can see like some other red stuff in the closet. So we tried to again try that, you know, tie that through line. I don't like costumes that don't make sense. Like it has to make sense in the story of the movie. Otherwise, it just comes out of nowhere and feels wrong or feels off. And you never want an audience to question a costume in that way.
Right. And you know, you want it to feel believable. You know, you want your characters to feel like they're doing things that those characters would do. And you know, what you wear is a massive part of
Where do they store the costume? Is it on the hanger? Is it on the ground? I mean, I just finished filming a comedy drama with Troye Sivan, and his character picks up a lot of clothes from the floor. And so everything had to be pre-wrinkled. We stored it in bags, in garment bags. So it would be pre-wrinkled for when he wore it in the scene. And so it's like, you really have to think about how the characters treat their clothes too, and where did they get them from? Do they hold special meaning? Do they not hold meaning? So it's really getting into the character's head, and a lot of that discussion comes from me talking to my actors too about what they think the character would have done. So you really have to build that world in a big way, otherwise it just feels untruthful and not right.
Oh my gosh. And this reminds me that like one of my biggest pet peeves with costumes is when it looks too crisp and too clean, and it makes like no sense. You know, it's like this character's out in the desert and their outfit's like entirely clean. Like, why are they not dirty? And like it doesn't add up. And like, or like, why are the shoes so white? It doesn't make any sense. And it's like, oh my gosh, like distressing and costuming is so important. And then like thinking about these kinds of things, because otherwise you have like a super crisp t-shirt and you know, you have like a character running through sewers or something. It makes no sense.
That is one of my biggest pet peeves too. So I really strive to like no matter the size of my movie, to always have an ager dyer for my last week of prep so they can just wear everything down. Like this last movie with Troy, like every single thing had to be like lived in, and that takes hours to do. Like the butcher's Vince's costume, for example, each one of his 20 pairs of shirts or 20 shirts took 3 hours to do every single shirt. So that's a lot of hours to distress all of his clothes. And it's hard because you have to really do it big, because a lot of it doesn't show up on camera, especially because his like main shirt is black. And so we get really hard in real life, but on camera, it only picks up a third of what we did. And we knew that was going to happen. So you have to like sort of play with what works in real life. It looks crazy. It looks a little crazy or a little too far in real life, but then you see it on camera and you're like, oh, that's the right level.
Right. Well, that also brings up the point of like costumes, you know, especially with like horror and action and sci-fi, like they go through so many changes throughout the film. There's so many different distressing jobs to be done, but that there's also so many duplicates that have to be made.
Yes, so many. I mean, there were 20. Vince had 20.
Oh my gosh.
Over 7 stages. So there were 7 stages of his costume, and then multiple duplicates in each one. And then also tracking all this stuff is really tough, because the brilliant thing about Chris and Michael's script is that when they swap bodies, the dialogue tag is their mind. So Millie becomes Vince.
Right.
But that makes paperwork impossible for us, because we're like, okay, yes, that's totally the right thing to do in the script, but then how do we track who these people are? So we created 2 new characters, Miller, which is the butcher in Millie's body, and Billy, which is Millie in the butcher's body, and that's how we tracked. So like,
oh my gosh,
Vince had his butcher costume, but then most of his costumes were Billy. And so just like tracking all of that was quite a fun challenge. But like, I love that in the script. It's like, yeah, it's who they are in their head, who's the character. But then we had to figure out how to track that in our realm. But yeah, everyone has a million costumes. Catherine's butcher costume, we had so many duplicates.
Oh my gosh, I can imagine.
12 pairs of jeans, and I think we had 8 leather jackets, and I bought everything that I could. And those jeans were special edition at the time. So I bought every pair that existed on the planet. Like I bought some from Europe.
Well, it's like not only having duplicates of the duplicates, you then have to get the distressing right on each of the duplicates, which is just absolutely crazy.
Poor ager dyer Janet is like the most brilliant person in the world, and I put her through the ringer on that one. I mean, not only like the butcher was most of her life, and then Catherine is a butcher, especially after the chainsaw moment. I mean, I took over blooding her jeans after the chainsaw moment because Janet had just too much to do. So it was a lot. It was a lot.
On top of which, you know, this is your second time costuming a school, you know, and with Happy Death Day to You being a college campus and then this being a high school, you have a ton of BG to manage as well. And what I think you did really well with on Freaky is that these costumes make the school feel like a real school, you know, and it feels very much like this could be a snapshot into reality. It doesn't feel too costumey.
Like this school it feels like a film school, you know. I want it to feel like these are actual real kids in school and not just this is the film version of what a school looks like. But then also playing around with sort of heightened color blocking, like especially the moment when Millie when Catherine as the butcher walks into the school with the blue and yellow cheerleaders, and then she's wearing the red leather jacket. Like there's something really cool about that primary spread that is a fun moment. But then you want everyone else to really feel like real people, because if you ground that part of the story, the fantastical elements make more sense and you can sort of go along with it better.
And you know what's great about background is that they can really be utilized as a wonderful tool, not only to build the world and, you know, make it feel like based in reality, but also to play with color palettes and to enhance all the other aspects of the film, including the central costume design. And I think that you did that really, really well with Freaky.
Oh, thank you. I also love the big rally football game, or the homecoming game. I had a contest for all my background. So if they showed up wearing like blue, yellow, and like, you know, their best rally gear, there was a series of prizes for like best dressed. And so I had so many amazing Atlanta backgrounds show up. Some people made sweatshirts. I had people.
That's such a good idea.
And then it made it a little bit more fun for them too, because like we were all freezing. It was one of the coldest nights I've ever experienced in my life.
Oh.
And they're having to wear fall, you know, not heavy coats in this football game. And they were all good sports. So trying to make, you know, add a little bit more fun to it too.
Yeah.
You know, that's really tough. And I don't feel like background are given the credit that they're due. They have to really sit through a lot of cold.
For real. They just have to stay there forever.
So I loved everybody that night, and everyone did an amazing job. This one guy wore this like blue and yellow wig. It was really fun. And then it feels more organic because they came up with it themselves. It wasn't like from my head. And so that gave me this randomness and more true to life kind of vibe.
Well, and that also kind of helps them relax too, because, you know, it's like them dressing themselves so they can get a little more comfortable.
Yes. And then they feel more them. Same with the big party scene at the end. I sort of do these detailed picture boards and written sort of instructions for my background, but then they get to give it their own spin. One of my favorite instructions to them is, please wear your own style, like wear who you are. And then we can play around with colors and things like that.
Well, to speak to the point of personal style and like individual ideas for a character's costume coming straight from the actor portraying them, how do you mesh an actor's ideas about what they think their character should wear and also their own personal style with your ideas about that?
It's really fun when you're on the same page from the beginning, but that doesn't always happen. So it's a lot of really discussing those world building moments. Like, you know, this is the person in the script, but what is your idea of the outer bounds of that? Like what's in between those lines that you really are on board with? But there's certain things that you have to balance with both the director's vision, your vision, the actor's vision. So it's really those people coming together. And then what's the scene going to look like production design wise? What is the camera going to be doing? What does the lighting look like? It's like so many people that you have to completely keep up-to-date communication with. But I love that it's a very collaborative art. But my favorite part is the fittings, getting to really build that character together. And sometimes you get it first try, and sometimes it takes several tries. And it's not, oh, you did this wrong. It's like, oh no, we're finding it together. Same like Catherine's butcher look. We were on the same page from the very beginning, but as we started trying our first go around on, it just didn't feel right to both of us. And then we couldn't really figure out what the thing was. So we were like, okay, we really like this jean shape. When we decided from the get-go, okay, it's not a tight jean, it's a loose jean, because that's what the butcher would have picked. And it's a long discovery process. So the first fitting is really just the beginning of the journey. And, you don't want to get too hung up on, oh, that first fitting, nothing worked. And it's like, that's okay. It was information gathering.
So how long was the production timeline for Freaky from like start to end?
See, I remember last year, Chris first told me about the script in May. He sent me the script. I like fell off my couch laughing. It was so funny. And like seeing the finished product now, it's exactly how I experienced reading it was how I experienced watching it. I was like, oh, it totally translated exactly. I mean, a lot of stuff changed for the better too over the course of it. So like read the script in May, got to it. I did my first week of prep in New York, first week of September last year. And then I got to Atlanta, like I think September 9th, and we started filming mid-October, and then we wrapped at the mid-December. And then I got home just exactly a year ago yesterday, we wrapped. Then I got back to New York like right before Christmas. And then we did a little bit of reshooting or edits this summer, and then that was it.
I'm curious about the pre-production process for you because I know that especially for costume designers, like the pre-production process can oftentimes be the bulkiest or just if not the bulkiest, extremely bulky.
Yeah, usually you never have enough time in pre-production, so you try to do as much as you can before, but also you're not getting paid in the beginning parts, so you don't want to do too much because then you feel kind of annoyed. So it's like, but because it's Chris, I was like, I'll do anything. I was so excited about the movie. I started early and started. I knew it was going to be Catherine. I knew it was going to be Vince. So I started watching all of Catherine's movies. I'd seen enough. I watched a couple of Vince's recent movies, just like, the last few, to sort of get a vibe of like, how are they moving around these days? Like, what kind of clothes are they wearing in these movies? And that's like my research gathering process. So I start there. And then it was really reading the script a bunch of times and then digging through Instagram and Pinterest are my two main ones for like modern high school kind of vibes. It was like, I want to find real people on Instagram. What are the kids wearing these days? I'm so far removed from high school now. I really wanted to make sure I did my research properly, So digging into like that takes weeks, like 2 full weeks of Instagram and Pinterest and internet deep diving. That's a long, and then I get into photography and photography books. I mean, the butcher's costume came from 2 professional photographs, one of a miner in 1974 and one of a truck driver. And so it's funny that that's where like my main 2 images came from. But you sort of gather the world. I think I have 500 or 600 photos of research for the butcher, but I ended up only using 2. So it's like you really want to try to find as many images as possible and then narrow down from there. It's you take everything under the sun and then you feel like, okay, I've exhausted every option that's out there. Let's now cull the best things from it. And that takes the longest, but it's often the most fun because when you like discover that, oh, that's what I've been searching for, that's what's in my head, then you're like, oh, good, I found that thing, and you move on to the next character and the next character. And then you you research your actors too, photos of them, like what clothes do they wear, what's their personal style, because you also, if you're doing, say, a high school movie, I used a lot of Misha, who plays Josh, a lot of their style totally works for Josh.
Yeah.
I wanted to sort of emulate a bit of what their style is because it works so well. But then there's people like Catherine, whose personal style does not work at all for Millie. And so finding what shapes you can get to that are different from her style, but also make sense for her body.
Yeah, totally.
So that's definitely like the beginning part. And then you finally like get into true pre-production where you have like, your actors cast. And luckily with Chris, he cast people so early so I could start shopping really early. And so all of my local Atlanta actors, I fit first because I could sort of get my mind to focus on them first. And so I knew that they were good to go by the time I had spent all my time with Vince and Catherine, because I knew that that was going to be harder. And so like, let me get these characters who I can do now and pay them the attention that they deserve at this point. Especially the first thing I bought on the movie were the Letterman jackets and then the cheerleader costumes, because those were both custom made and they took 4 to 5 weeks to make, and I needed like 19 of the Letterman jackets.
Well, and that kind of helps build the world too, and like the the environment and the story of the school. It's like, what's their mascot? What are they wearing? What are the school colors?
The beaver was so great, and it's my second mascot costume that I got to design for Chris. So I mean, I did the baby and Happy Death Day to You, and then the beaver costume in this. We wanted sort of a sad beaver that looked like the school bought it pre-made somewhere and then added stuff to it, which is exactly what I did. I bought it from China. Yes. It came over. I added the hat. I added the jersey. I made those jerseys myself. I luckily am a tailor, so I could just whip those together. But we had 4 of the beaver costumes because she gets stabbed in them, and we needed like stunt double and her doubles and a hero. Yeah. So that was super fun. I even tried running in the beaver when it arrived just to make sure that I have a great video of me running around the office. But it's just so finding like the things that you need to pay attention to first. Like I had to order that mascot costume 4 weeks out. I had to order those letter jackets 5 weeks out. And so, okay, let me take care of those things that are in the football uniforms. I had to get like set 3 weeks out. You know, you really have to make a timeline.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that like timing is everything, and knowing what you have the ability to allocate your time to is like the whole process. And it's like, oh, this thing's gonna take 5 weeks. What can we do in the meantime? Oh, we can do this now, and then that'll be done in 5 weeks or something. And I can also imagine that with your background as a tailor, and coming from theatrical live productions, that I can imagine that you picked up a lot of those technical skills, and were able to kind of bring those technical skills to your transition into film.
I mean, starting in theater was one of the greatest things for my film career. I'm so grateful for the training, especially, you have $2 to make a play, and you have to just be creative to figure it out. And I loved learning all of those and also in theater school, you have to do every single area. You have to have a practicum. You have to learn lighting. You have to learn all these different skills, which I can really take with me. Okay, no, enough of camera and lighting and all these different things that it's helpful to have sort of an awareness on how lighting works, on how like what those colors mean and how does it affect your clothing on set or on stage. And so all of those little things really helped me. And then I did a theater sewing practicum my first year of college. And so I sewed in second grade, but I didn't sew again till first year of college. And I discovered that I was really good at it, and I just fell in love with it. And so I worked at there was a professional theater at La Jolla Playhouse on campus for UC San Diego. So I worked in the costume shop while I went to school. So I basically just lived in the theater department for my 4 years. But that gave me, I've never taken a sewing class. I've learned all by doing, working at that theater and then going to New York and working in a costume shop as a firsthand and a tailor. And like I got all those skills just by working and by doing it. And that's been incredibly helpful. I mean, on my movie Piercing, that was also like, that was a $2 million film, super tiny, but they gave me enough money to do half of my clothes custom. But I wanted to do a few more things custom than I could afford. But I'm like, well, I can just make them myself. So like Mia Wasikowska's second outfit in that movie, the skirt and top, I just made myself because I could. So
amazing. Yeah,
it's helpful to have those skills because a costume designer doesn't have to be a tailor, but they have to know enough to be able to communicate with people who can do that. But I like being a tailor because I can pull off stuff last minute if I have to. Like on Freaky, I made all those beaver jerseys because there wasn't enough time or money to get additional tailoring days. So I was like, well, I'll just do it because I can.
Well, I'm also curious about what's the biggest challenge for you? I guess one with Freaky in particular, but also with costume design in general.
Gosh, I mean, every project is so different. And so there's always a different challenge on each thing. I think I'm always faced with a new thing that I haven't done before. And so that's always like, oh, okay, well, I never ordered Letterman jackets before. And, figuring out, okay, what do I have to do that? Like on Happy Death Day, I'd never done a mascot costume. There's all these like weird challenges you get faced with. But the biggest challenge is just getting everything done in time.
Right.
That's always the hardest part. Like first day of filming is always terrifying because I remember for Freaky, I slept at the office and was finishing aging and dyeing stuff until I had to physically take it from the office, put it in my car and drive straight to set. It's just, there's always trying to time manage is one of the biggest parts because you never have enough time. No matter what size movie you have, you never have enough time. So I think the hardest part is sometimes letting go of stuff that you wanted to have happen, that you just didn't have the time or the budget or the need for. I think letting go on those, like things that sort of stick with you. Oh, I really wish that I had had time to do this, or that this would have happened. And you can't get too stuck in that, because you only have time for a certain amount of things. You can't get it all done. And I don't think there's a single designer who feels completely happy with the finished product, because there's always like little tweaks that you want to make, and you have to like let that go.
Right. And, I think that being a costume designer, you have attention to detail where every little piece of a costume means something to you. And, you put your heart into the tiniest details, even just like down to, oh, this, I wish this jacket could have just like a little more beading on it, or I wish that, this costume could have one more piece. And, because you're creating a work of art, and it really means something to you. It's very personal.
Like, oh, I wish that would have happened, or like a continuity error that was like out of my team's control, that was like something that was happening, or all of those little things. You're like, oh, I wish that we could have fixed that. But there's always going to be something,
Right. Well, what is something about costume design that you feel like people maybe don't understand, or just don't know? Because, costume design is a department that really isn't talked about very much.
Yeah, not as much, especially in the horror realm, which is kind of a bummer. I feel like costume designers for modern movies and genre movies often get a raw deal, because so many of those clothes are hard in their own ways. I mean, period dramas are super difficult in also, but each has their own challenges. But really, really nice to have people pay more attention to like comedy costumes or horror costumes. I mean, there's designers who are busting their butt to make all these clothes happen and doing really amazing work. And it's tough when people don't see that. Again, for me, thinking about being a psychologist, being a historian, and all the different things that goes into designing, say, Freaky, it's not a costume movie, but I'm really proud of every choice that I made in that movie and made it feel real, and all of the different things that you have to think about to make it feel right. I just didn't grab a red jacket, threw it on Catherine, it's like, there's your costume. It's so much, it was weeks of work to get to that place. And it on its face looks very, very simple, because it should, because the butcher didn't want to put up, he's not worn jewelry before. He's like, jewelry, it's like boots, jeans, top, jacket. That's it. But there was so much work that went into making that simple costume. So I think that's really frustrating. People don't see that effort, because it should look effortless. It should feel correct. And so our work often does blend into the background, because it should.
Yeah.
And like, that's the tough balance, where your work, if it's seamless, then people don't think about it. And so it's like this endless cycle.
Exactly. Well, and also there's, you had mentioned that the butcher in Millie's body, or affectionately named Billy, was like, that costume was a bodysuit that had padding in it, and it was constructed in a way that would keep the actor safe. And so there's, all these different elements to costume design that is so much more than just picking an outfit, that, it's like you're world building, but then you're also like doing these things to make sure that the actors are as comfortable as they can be within their character, and also physically comfortable.
Catherine's amazing stunt double, Kelly, who she was also Tree's stunt double in Happy Death Day to You.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
So Kelly was both Happy Death Days and this. She's one of the greatest people alive, and she's the one who like ran off the building, dropped
Oh my gosh.
in Happy Death Day to You. She's badass.
She sounds so cool.
I wanted to keep her as safe as possible. I mean, just like Happy Death Day to You, with Tree's final look, that jean jacket, the gray shirt, and like the long pants, that was as much coverage as I could get that still made sense for Tree. And so when she went through the glass at the end of that movie, all that Kelly had to wear was some moleskin on her hands so she didn't get cut. And she only got a couple of superficial cuts, and that's because I was able to protect her with that jean jacket. So it's a choice that worked for Tree, but it also so much in mind of what stunts had to happen. And sort of the same for Freaky. That red jacket was so key because it protected both Catherine and Kelly for the whole movie. Because so much happens, so many fight scenes and being tackled. And so you really have to play that out. In the original script, that outfit was a dress. Chris and I from day one were like, dress is never going to work. That was just a placeholder for, because he knew I was going to design it. So he's like, you'll figure it out. Like that vibe, which I totally got what they were going for with the dress, because it's so different from, it's funny though, I put Millie in a dress, but the butcher in jeans and a jacket. It's this really nice like juxtaposition. But you really have to take what's in the script and then make it make sense. And so that outfit really worked story-wise, but also it protected them from all the stunts that had to happen.
Well, also, like, speaking of the butcher, I had read that you took inspiration from old, classic slashers like Michael Myers and Jason, but not wanting it to feel too much like them and still making it feel fresh and also like, and like it is, in his universe. But, and on that topic, you created a new slasher icon. And like, we had sort of talked about earlier with horror not necessarily, talking about costume design a lot, where horror is a genre where costume design is so integral to the experience and to the to the community as well. These are the costume designers are the people that are creating what your favorite slasher icon looks like, and it's the costumes that you wear on Halloween. And it's so not given the credit that it's due, and costume designers are not given the credit that they're due, especially in the horror genre when it comes to creating, such a massive part of the experience and why horror is so fun and so memorable.
Sense in the story wise, like when I broke it down on Instagram, it's like, okay, where does the butcher get his clothes? So he obviously, once the clothes that he's wearing get too disgusting because he lives in that terrible lair, and like, where does he get his clothes? Well, he kills more people that are roughly his size to get more clothes. So I wanted to make sure that the clothes fit but also didn't fit, like there was an ill-fittingness to it because he killed some blue collar workers to steal their clothes. And but he's been wearing this set for a while, so it's still pretty gross. And also he's got like some of the teenage blood on him from the first scene. So we had like his first costume, and then we had to make sure that we carried the continuity over for like when he meets Millie, and then his shoulder wound bleeds, so we had to make sure that there was his dried blood on the shoulder the next day, but there's no knife wound because the no knife went in there, but he still has the shoulder wound. So like there's so many like steps that go into it. But yeah, where did that costume come from? Oh, he killed somebody in the woods, or like a truck driver or something like that. But again, I didn't want to make it look like the mechanic jumpsuit that Michael wears, or anything that skewed to Jason. I wanted to sort of get the vibe of those guys, but also do something different. And it's tough because you're like, what is imposing and scary, but also makes sense in the world of the movie, but also is not too gross that when Millie goes into the butcher's body, you're not like, ugh, that's disgusting. And hard to look at, and takes you out of the fact that that's Millie. And so there's a lot of like lines that you have to walk on that one.
I'm curious about your, given your range of background with costume design, I'm particularly curious what your thoughts are on, kind of the general question, the big question of what makes costume design so integral to the film experience, to you, and, your opinion on that at large, and, and to horror specifically. Why is costume design such an integral part of making the film experience feel so full?
I think for me, like you see so much of the clothes in when you're looking at the screen. So much of the time that you see your actors, you're seeing what they're wearing. It takes up most of the screen a lot of the time. And so that's what you're looking at, and it needs to feel both in your face and also invisible at the same time, where you
Yeah.
want this character to feel like a real person, but also not like be staring at the clothes. It has to walk this line that's really tough to navigate sometimes, and make it feel true to life, and really go along with what the actor is doing. And if an actor doesn't feel comfortable in their costume, I mean, I have had some experience with some actors where we just disagreed on the direction of a character. But for me, I always have to figure out how to make the actor feel like they're right in the character. So there's oftentimes that I have to change my mind, because if an actor's uncomfortable in what they're wearing, it's never going to work. It's going to come off on camera. So you have to make sure that you're walking hand in hand with them all the way through, because they have to feel comfortable in it. Otherwise, it's never going to work. As much as I want them to wear a certain thing, if they don't feel that that's the right thing, it is never going to work. And so it's a lot of compromise and talking. I mean, I've been lucky to work with some of the most amazing actors, and we've been, step in step the whole time, which is so exciting. But it's not always that way.
Right.
So it's a lot of I feel like as a costume designer too, we're sort of one of the main central figures in filmmaking, because you have to work with all the crew, but you also work with all the actors, and you're also a liaison between the directors and the actors in a lot of ways, and so you feel very central to the whole film, because you're talking to almost everybody. Whereas different department heads have their own sort of, or don't deal with the actors as much, or this or that, but for me it's like I have to deal with everybody, and that's what makes it so fun.
Right.
To deal with, working with production design, and like what colors is every scene going to be like, and making sure that you're always on the same page, working with the prop department in what's a prop, what's a costume, what's a propstume, which is in both of our arenas, and then dealing with and talking with the DP and how they're going to shoot a shot, like what's the camera angle going to be, what's the coloring going to be like, what is the light. So you really have to be on the same page with everybody, and that's a lot of communication, a lot of juggling balls to figure it out. And then also at the end of the day, talking to the director, making sure that you're on the same page. So it's like a lot of people that you have to collaborate with, that you also have to make sure all of their ideas work together too. And so an actor and a director can have different ideas, which I've experienced before, and then I have to sort of massage both sides to then have them both come to a place where it works. And that's often difficult. And there was a couple times where I was on the actor's side and disagreed with the director, and I had held the line, because it was something where the actor wasn't comfortable wearing a thing, because she felt too sexualized. And so you're like, I am a protector for my actors. I am like one of the first lines of defense against either producers or director or somebody. It's like I am there for them. I am their advocate. And if they're not comfortable, I have to be the person who's there to stand up for them, because that also it creates difficult dynamics. So it's like you have to really be both a psychologist for your characters and also for all the people that you're working with too. So it's a lot to keep in your head.
Well, thank you so much, Whitney, for taking the time to chat with me today. This has been so much fun, and I've been looking forward to this for so long, and I'm so glad that we finally got the chance to chat. And I'm really excited to hear about what you have coming up next. What can we expect from you in the future?
I have hopefully two movies coming out next year, so I can't wait for people to see those. Two non-horror movies, and then hopefully I do more horror. I love bouncing around. I'm like, just let me have fun.
Yes, absolutely. That is what it is all about. It's about creating, having fun, having a good time. Where can we find you online to keep up with you and see what your future projects are all about?
I am on Instagram, WAA Costume Design. I'm on Twitter, Whitney A. Adams. Those are my two main places that I hang out, so you can come find me there. I have a blog on my website that I haven't updated in a minute, but I have started this project in quarantine to watch every movie that won Best Costume Design Oscar, and then writing a blog about them. So I have like 4 posts up right now.
Oh my God. I checked out your blog last night, and I was reading the Dangerous Liaisons post that you just did, and your deep dive was so fascinating, like the intricacies around the fabrics that they used, and also just like the detailing and the corsetry in that movie is absolutely phenomenal. I have a newfound obsession with it after reading this post. I'm really excited to see your other posts and see these deep dives because this is like content that no one's really delving into, and they absolutely should because it's mind blowing.
Love digging into the behind the scenes of how those designers created those costumes. And like, so I do deep dives, which is why it takes me a while to do each post, but I do like the deepest of dives. And I've almost finished my Marie Antoinette post, so hopefully that'll be up soon. But I'm like back to it because I've just been I had to finish my last movie, and then I have a mask shop, so I've been making masks.
Sweet. Well, be sure to check out Whitney on Twitter, Instagram, and on her blog. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at PythonPatsy. And you can find my horror collective, Monstrous Femme Films, on Twitter at monstrous_femme and on our Instagram at Monstrous Femme Films. I want to thank you again, Whitney, for taking the time to chat with me. This has been so much fun, and congrats on Freaky. It was absolutely amazing.
Oh, good. Thank you so much for supporting, and it was so fun to talk to you.
Yay! Well, thank you again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time.